12-year-olds anymore. That was what George Lucas said when he first created the Star Wars trilogy. He said he made it for the 12-year-olds. It's for kids. And the prequels, too. He made them for the kids. The Ewoks and Jar Jar Binks, the Jawas. He made these cute little things for all these kids. And Star Wars these days is getting more and more away from that. It's not for the fans. It's not for the kids. It's for the directors and the producers who want to push their own thoughts and ideas on what they think Star Wars should be, not what George Lucas envisioned. If Star Wars is what George Lucas envisioned and it's his brainchild, his wife, and everything that everybody does is counterproductive to that, then it's not Star Wars anymore. The reason I'm saying all this is because I'm reading more and more stuff about this Acolyte show. And like I said, I'm going to give it, the benefit of the doubt and watch the first episode or two. But if it's complete poop, I'm not watching it anymore. And I've got some articles that I've pulled up that talk about what Leslye Headland, the director of the Acolyte, has tweeted and what she said in articles. And but first, I want you to listen to what Jon Faverau has to say about Star Wars.
Well, that's the thing with especially with Star Wars, but always you want to make sure if you're making it and the fans don't dig what you're doing, I don't know that I could keep doing it. Like a big part of it is that you want to connect. You want to connect with the fans. When you're taking on something like Star Wars, I didn't create Star Wars. I grew up with Star Wars, and so you want to make sure you're servicing it in a way that's respectful to what came before, and in a way that is hopefully delights the audience and the fans. Working with Dave Filoni, who I think you just spoke to, has been a great partnership because he's so plugged into that Star Wars culture from having worked on it with George for 10 years on Clone Wars. And he and I have known each other for a long time, and for us to get together, it really feels like we're running like we're throwing a big party, and we really are digging it and appreciating this moment.
So that is the whole ideology behind Star Wars. It should be the whole ideology behind any movie. You give the fans what they want. That's how you bring in people. I mean, you don't sit there and do your own thing. It's not for the fans. It's for you. You're the one that's putting your own ideas and ideologies into what you think should be in this movie, book, whatever. And it's not what the fans want. It's what the director thinks is the best thing. And a lot of people are misplaced in their thoughts and ideologies of what should be the best thing. So as for the Acolyte, I'm just I don't know. It's crazy. So let's look. I'm going to show you why I'm so a little flustered with this show. It hasn't come out yet. So there's this guy on TikTok called Data Racer, and he's pulled a lot of Leslye Headland's tweets and stuff from social media. And his thoughts are: Leslye Headland interview on her new show. She thinks Star Wars is about politics and fan options aren't valid. Hired a writer who's never seen Star Wars, if you can believe that. Female and queer representation is a top priority. I literally cry whenever I see it. And he thinks it's going to be a train wreck. And the more I see this stuff, the more I kind of agree. So it says, the Acolyte showrunner Leslye Headland explains why queer representation in Star Wars universe is so important to her as a superfan. Comic Book Resources again says the Acolyte showrunner Leslye Headland isn't worried about the passionate fan base of the franchise when it comes to crafting her show. And here are articles, or here are links if you want to look at this. This is not, I'm not pulling this out of my butt. This is just stuff that she said. You know, she can be a Star Wars fan all she wants, but if she's not following the Star Wars mantra and ideals, and she's pushing what she wants, it's not Star Wars. The Acolyte Leslye Headland explains hiring a writer who hasn't watched Star Wars to help her with Disney Plus series. Oh my gosh. That's like needing a person to create a nuclear bomb. Basically, Star Wars a nuclear bomb now, with the fans just frothing at the mouths because they are not being listened to. And you hire a person who's a biologist to come do that. And you give them a book and say, here you go. Here's how you create a nuclear bomb. Leslye Headland says she hopes to keep reflecting George Lucas's political themes in the Disney Plus series. It's truly what he was interested in talking about and looking at and digging into. All right. So those are articles that you can look up. 2 from Comic Book Resources, 1 from the playlist, and 1 from Star Wars The Direct. And here are some of them. And I'll read the blue parts. And that goes for ideology as well. I mean, it's funny because a lot of the feedback that I'll get, and I use the term feedback very lightly, but when I do go on social media, the feedback is don't make Star Wars political. I'm like, George Lucas made it political. Those are political films. And they are not political films. Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, a lot of people are like, that was about the Vietnam War. He made these movies for children. You know, 12-year-olds, when I was there, I saw it when I was 6 years old. There was no thought of political motivation. I thought it was a science fiction movie. It was fantastic, and I loved it. And I didn't think anything about political anything. To have the power when you're creating media to just put in certain types of people that maybe aren't necessarily in normal mainstream content or media is just, I know that for people who don't identify that way, it doesn't seem that important, but to us, it's huge. I literally saw an Orbitz commercial with 2 women going on vacation. I was like, again, crying. It just hits you on a level that you don't know you're missing it until you see it. Now, I know that certain things can affect people in different ways, but if you start crying over commercials, I mean, I'm not taking away from her enjoyment and excitement about things, but it just seems very odd that you would cry over an Orbitz commercial. And her feeling excited about being able to put her people in to these things that aren't mainstream. If you'll remember in Star Wars, George Lucas brought in Luke Skywalker, or Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher. These were all non-known people. I mean, Harrison Ford had just gotten through working with George Lucas on his last movie, and I can't remember what the name of the movie was. If I remember it, I'll let you know. But these were not known people. These were like brand new people. So, I mean, they weren't mainstream, but they weren't trying to push an agenda. They were just actors that were wanting to work. Okay, his film was American Graffiti. That's what it was. All right. So here's another one. There were people like myself that were like later in life, Dave Filoni acolytes. I literally had one writer that was like, I've never seen any of them. I've never seen any Star Wars media. And she's texting me before we started the room. She's like, Luke and Leia are brother and sister? What the? Now, I've met people who haven't seen Star Wars, and I'm always like, you should see it. You should watch it. I want you to watch it. I think it's a great movie. And I've had people on my show that have done a movie watch with me that have never seen Star Wars. They thought, you know, when they saw Star Wars, they thought, you know, it wasn't as dated as some 1970 movies, but they really, really enjoyed it. They thought maybe it was just a tiny bit, you know, dated, but I've seen it so many times. I don't really see the dating anymore. But they really enjoyed it. Um, but I would think that you would hire somebody onto a job that knew what was going on. How can you hire a person to a job, to a construction site, and put them in like one of the positions of as a manager, and they've never had any experience with that? Or have a person who's they hire them as a helicopter pilot and they've never been a helicopter pilot before. It's just crazy. All right. You have to feel like this is speaking directly to you, regardless of what you might be going through. At what point in your life you're going through it. That being said, as somebody that is a lesbian, every time I see gay or queer representation in media, I scream with happiness. Here's a fact, and trust me, I have nothing against gay, lesbian, trans, anything like that. The trans population in the world is like 1%. The gay and lesbian population is between 3 and 5%. I just don't understand why they feel like she feels like she has to push it, and why gay and lesbian have to be pushed so hard. I don't care if it's in the movie. I just don't want it to be the main focus. Don't make it the main focus. The main focus should be Star Wars. That's all. Another one, I saw a video of a little girl dressed up as Rey at Disney World or Disneyland or wherever it was. My wife sent me the video. It was so cute. I'm watching it. I'm kind of like, okay, cute. Yeah, I got it. And then I started crying again. I don't. Okay, she's crying. Okay, last one. Probably, one of the things that we did in our writer's room to kind of break the ice was ask, who's your favorite Star Wars character? And you could tell that people, when I said mine, were like, yeah, well, you're gay. That's because you're gay. But it's true. Okay, whatever. All right. So, and if you're not familiar, she was Harvey Weinstein's assistant from 2003 to 2008, I believe. And it got her the ability in 2008 to produce her play that she was creating, and I can't remember the name of it. For those of you who don't know about Harvey Weinstein, here's the background. Harvey Weinstein and his brother Bob Weinstein formed the film company Miramax and led the company from 1979 to 2005. That company was purchased by the Walt Disney Company in June of 1993, though the Weinsteins continued to run the company until September 2005. When they left the company to run the Weinstein Company, TWC, which they founded in March of 2005. So that means from 2003 to 2005, she worked for Miramax as Harvey Weinstein's personal assistant, and maybe she was an employee of the Walt Disney Company for that time. So, in October of 2017, the New York Times and New Yorker reported that dozens of women had accused film producer Harvey Weinstein of rape, sexual assault, and sexual abuse over a period of 30 years. Over 80 women in the film industry eventually accused Weinstein of such acts. Weinstein himself denied any non-consensual sex. Shortly after, he was dismissed from the Weinstein Company, expelled from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences and other professional associations, and retired from public view. And then it just talks more about his stuff. So here's my thought. She was his personal assistant from 2003 to 2008, I believe. So she was his assistant for 5 years. During those 5 years, didn't she know what was going on? She wants to be the person who is fighting for women's rights, pushing the women's agenda, all these things. But then she worked for this guy, this sleaze, Harvey Weinstein, who raped, sexually assaulted, and sexually abused all these women. And she's his personal assistant. That just flabbergasts me that happened. If you say, oh, she probably didn't know about it, A personal assistant is a personal assistant. They do things on a personal level for that person. Anything from dry cleaning to picking up, you know, groceries, helping their dog to the vet, anything he wants. And you don't think she knew what was going on? Shame. Shame on you for thinking and shame on him, and shame on her. The Acolyte is hiring an intimacy coordinator. Now, if you don't know what an intimacy coordinator is, I'm going to read what it is. If you're unfamiliar with intimacy coordinators, SAG-AFTRA notes the position is an advocate, a liaison between actors and production, and a movement coach and/or choreographer in regards to nudity and simulated sex and other intimate and hyper-exposed scenes. The union specifically details intimacy coordinators act as an advocate who serves as a liaison between actors and a production, ensure that the performers and other production personnel adhere to proper safety protocols, serve as a resource in realizing a director's vision, assume the role of a movement choreographer if requested by the director, enhance believability, strives to build an environment in which actors understand what is expected of them in hyper-exposed scenes to give their informed and continued consent. Further, union relays intimacy coordinators should be hired in scenes involving nudity or simulated sex or upon request for other intimate and hyper-exposed scenes. What the heck? Why? Why are they putting that in the Acolyte? This is Star Wars. This is supposed to be for kids, 12-year-olds. And they're doing these simulated sex scenes. I tell you what, I'll make a caveat to my thing about watching the Acolyte. You know, I said I would give it a shot. Here's my deal. If they show the opening scene as a sex scene on the Acolyte, first episode, I'm done. That's it. I'm not. I mean, how can you show that on Disney Plus, a sex scene? Especially in Star Wars, you have so many children watching Star Wars. The Mandalorian with Grogu, oh my gosh, that they brought in Grogu for the kids. George Lucas probably just ate that up. He probably loved it that they brought in Grogu. But you're doing this Acolyte series 100 years before the Clone Wars. Oh, that sounds great. That sounds great. But then you're pushing this all women. I mean, that's what Leslye Headland said. It's like she's pushing all women. She's not unincluding men, but it's all focused on women. All women. And, you know, there's a couple of guys in there. And then she's having these sex scenes. Are they going to be... What's going on? Never have they had sex scenes. When I went to go see the prequels with my wife, I went and saw them. And when we saw Attack of the Clones, I was like, there is no reason for them to have such a long scene with Anakin and Padme. That's one of the main reasons I don't really like Attack of the Clones, is because they have such a long romance part. And I'm like, I want the sci-fi, I want the action, I want, you know, just things to really blow my mind, not sit there and watch romance. And my wife's like, oh, there's always time for romance. No, this is a sci-fi movie. If you want a romance, make a rom-com or make a romantic movie, you know? And if you're going to have sex, don't have it in Star Wars. I mean, in Star Wars, Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back, I'll go back to those, the original three, you have Leia and Han kissing. I think they did once in Empire Strikes Back and then once in Return of the Jedi. And she kissed Luke, you know, just to make Han mad. But besides that, there was that tension, and you didn't need to have sexual scenes between Han and Leia. And George Lucas even took out like a scene in the cantina where Han had a girlfriend and he was kissing her, and Luke and Obi-Wan walked up to the table. You know, that's one of the scenes that they cut out of Star Wars. When Obi-Wan and Luke walk up to the table where Han's sitting, well, originally it was him sitting with a girl and they were kissing, and then she gets up and leaves when Luke and Obi-Wan sit down. So George took that out. But yeah, it's got me so upset right now. I mean, I just don't know what to expect. And I'm going to leave this video of Leslye Headland talking about her putting her own characters into Star Wars that she wrote before there was even the internet. I mean, okay, but are they Star Wars material, or is this you pushing your own thing and not caring about the fans?
I'm so sorry to bring up fan fiction again, but you said it, and I've asked your cast about it, and they all have a sneaking suspicion that some of that fan fiction may have inspired the Acolyte, or at least snuck its way into those pages.
Here's what I'll say. I did do a couple of RPG campaigns during COVID with my friends on Zoom, and there are a couple of characters from those campaigns that may or may not be in the show. So there's a little bit of that. The fan fiction that I wrote was many, many years ago, pre-internet, so it's not quite what the kids are doing now. But I will say I was always interested in female protagonists that were leaning toward the dark side of the Force and being interested in that. I think because when I was little and I heard Ben Kenobi say Vader was seduced by the dark side.
Vader was seduced by the dark side of the Force.
There was just something about that made my adolescent freak out. I was just like, why did he use that word seduce? Why did that happen? So I think that possibly some of that ended up in the show as well.
Well, I hope you enjoyed my video, and check this video out if you're interested in the Jedi Order. May the Force be with you always.